Memorial Day weekend of my senior year, charged $3 to get in, made $1,080. I was hooked. So I never graduated from Ohio State. Went around San Francisco putting up Scorpion posters. You build a reputation, and the only way you're successful in this industry is you had to be able to come through. It was all about reputations. I had the stereo system on the floor at Bowling Green. Sold it to my roommate so I could send in the binder. I lost $6,000. I'm 19, 20 years old. Because people always ask me, you've been driven for 46 years. And it goes back to that. I'm still pissed off at myself. I hired this guy to handle the bars, and they all left with pockets full of cash. They got ripped off blind. Find a coffee shop, Scott. I have this artist coming through. She's going to do a station wagon tour. She pulled up in the station wagon, so I helped her unload her station wagon. It ended up being Jewel. I engraved in my locker Bill Graham, Jules Belkin, and Jerry Weintraub. That was my goal. I was going to be one of those three guys. I didn't know which one, but I was going to be one of those three guys. My name is Scott Stienecker, CEO of PromoWest Productions and Regional Vice President for AEG Presents.
You know, it's amazing as we've been having these conversations, the sheer number, 15,000 acts, and then the quality of
15,000 shows. You have an opener to every one of those, so probably 30,000 acts, but 15,000 shows.
I've never asked you this question. Whatever got you interested in the music business?
Sophomore year in high school, went with my buddies to St. John's Arena, and we drove down to see Kiss. And I remember watching it thinking, who put something like this on? It blew me away. And I was a sophomore, I was 16. So I came back. A lot of the guys I ran around with were 2 years older than me because I played baseball with guys older. And they'd always get on our age group about, when you guys going to throw parties? We're always throwing the parties. So I said, all right, I'll throw a party. So we rented the Tri-County Event Center in Saline, Ohio, hired a band called Mandarin Cypher out of Akron, Ohio, and they painted their face like Kiss. And it was Memorial Day weekend of my senior year, and charged $3 to get in, made $1,080, and I was hooked.
Did your parents love music? Did they have one vision for you that was one way, and once you saw, hey, I want to get in the entertainment business, it was this way?
I grew up in St. Mary's, Ohio. My dad worked at Goodyear Tire and Rubber there in St. Mary's. Worked there for 43 years and never missed a day of work. He never called in sick in 43 years. And when they were on strike, I remember going over, as a little kid, we'd go over to where these guys are striking, and the one guy asked our name, and when I said my name, he goes, "Are you Bob Steinecker's son?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "He's the hardest worker in this factory." And that always stuck in my mind. So I got my work ethic, definitely. Well, and my mom was also a realtor, and she worked at the hospital, so she had a heavy work ethic also.
So the work ethic, the discipline. Now what about the vision? Maybe that kind of did come, that DNA did come from mom and dad.
No, it wasn't my parents. It was my brother, who was 4 years older than me, that if he would have been a tuba player, I'd have been a tuba player. Whatever he did, I played baseball, football, and basketball because he played baseball, football, and basketball. I got injured. I injured my neck my junior year in football, and the way I handled going into my senior year, I'm still disappointed in how I handled it. And the coach controlled my whole destiny. He didn't allow me to be the tailback anymore. He put me at different positions, and I knew then, at that point, I'll never let anybody control my destiny. So I came up with, what do I want to do? I read Dynamics of Goal Setting and Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude, 2 books. And I laid out my goals right then.
So that was the epiphany, though.
Yeah, that was, if I wouldn't have gotten injured in football and gotten upset with myself on how I handled it my senior year, I wouldn't have the drive that I had. Because people always ask me, you've been driven for 46 years. And it goes back to that. I'm still pissed off at myself. After Tri-County Event Center with Mandarin Cypher, I then tried to do pure Prairie League at the Allen County Fairgrounds. They were big at the time. They wanted $1,250 retainer, they called it, or binder. I didn't have $1,250, so I had a cool stereo. I had the stereo system on the floor at Bowling Green. The Marantz receiver and the Advent speakers and the Denon turntable, and sold it to my roommate for $1,250 so I could send in the binder. And we ended up not moving forward with the show, so I lost that. So the next show that I did was McGuffey Lane at the Allen County Fairgrounds, and I pulled that one off my sophomore year of college.
You actually borrowed some money from a farmer.
Yeah. Well, that was I didn't know. I was like, hey, I got to get the headliner something nice. So I had him fix him lobster.
The lobster part's true, but that's not how I remember it. How I remember it is he got enough lobster for the entire band and crew, and he put it in the motorhome behind the stage where was our dressing room, which was like probably an 85 or 90 degree day that day. And he put the lobster in there when the crew arrived. But the crew had to set up, get to a line check and everything. And we didn't show up till about 6 or 7 hours later. And the lobster is sitting in this hot motorhome. Suffice it to say, we didn't eat it.
He left out that part of the story. Do you recall the show? How did it go? How was it?
Oh, yeah, we thought it was great. But Scott was only 18 or 19 years old, and he wasn't allowed to sell beer. We had a lot of followers, and they were all big partiers. And they were selling beer that day, and none of his buddies could. So they let these other guys, and he said their pockets were like, they just floated. He's like, what's those guys' pocket? They took all the money. The beer sellers took all the money.
I was too young to run the bars, so I hired this guy out of Lima, Ohio to handle the bars, and they all left with pockets full of cash. They got ripped off blind.
But you learned.
But I learned. So I lost $6,000. I'm 19, 20 years old. So I went to Gary Liette, who was a farmer, friend of the family's, and I borrowed money from him so I could pay everything.
So really, you built this wonderful career in rock and roll off of a stereo equipment and a loan from a farmer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Pretty wild.
Why the live side of the business, Scott, and not the entertainment business in general?
Yeah, well, because my brother got into radio, he ended up going to Bowling Green, and he became the sales manager of Waffle Radio, which was the radio station there. I could have gone that radio path, but because I did that show my senior year in high school, and then I attempted the Pure Prairie League, and then I did the McGuffey Lane thing, I headed toward the live aspect of the industry. Yeah, it just always that's been my thing. And I was at Bowling Green for a year and a half, got on the concert committee there. I was a stage hand, put up flyers. I engraved in my locker Bill Graham, Jules Belkin, and Jerry Weintraub. And that was my goal. I was going to be one of those three guys. I didn't know which one, but I was going to be one of those three guys.
So let's go to California about our conversation on Bill Graham. Tell me about that story, why you did it. I take it you were 17.
Yeah, well, no, I was at Ohio State, was looking for somebody to run the PEP board, which was the concert board. So I applied and I got it. So I left Bowling Green, came down to Ohio State, and became head of the PEP board at Ohio State University. That's what got the door open for me with Steve Welcome. I still remember the guy's name. And he said, we don't have any internships. Sorry, he sent me a formal letter, but I was going to go out there to spend the summer with my brother. He ended up getting a job in Santa Barbara right out of college. So I went out, drove down to the offices, met Steve, said, here, why don't you take these Day on the Green posters and put them up? We have the Scorpions coming to Oakland Coliseum. So I went around San Francisco putting up Scorpion posters. So that's how it started. And then I would go to the office and they'd give me posters. So I was doing for Bill Graham what our interns do for us now. When I was out there, I went to there was a music academy, the California Music Business Academy. I attended that. My father paid for that for me, which was godsend. And then I met Gary Purnell, who was the head of Parallax Productions. And then Gary said, when you're done with your junior year, come out here, you can work with me under Parallax. So I never graduated from Ohio State. Drove out, lived with my brother, worked for Parallax. Parallax did shows in Berkeley, Santa Cruz, and Santa Barbara. So I did The Clash, Talking Heads, Tom Petty, and the Go-Go's. I did 4 different acts. how you broke into the industry back in that day in the late 70s. You go to William Morris and you work in the mailroom in New York City. So that's where I was headed. I was going to go to New York City and work in the mailroom. And then all this other stuff happened. But yeah, I thought that was, at that time, the only way. And then I was like, you know what, I need to get an internship with Bill Graham. There wasn't very many ways to get into the music industry, especially in the Midwest.
Was it exciting? Was it overwhelming when you were interning for Bill Graham and you're looking back and saying, God, not long ago I was back in Columbus, Ohio?
But my brother was living out there, so that helped it. I got to move in with my brother, and that helped the whole. But I never was intimidated by San Francisco or a big city.
You know, Scott learned from Bill Graham. And, you know, the two things that he thought were important is, one, we have to figure out a way to make money. That's the business portion of it. But also, I remember him talking about how Bill Graham had the bucket of apples at his events to make people feel at home, make people feel comfortable. And so I think the PromoWest way is the merger of that, is that we need to, you know, let the fans enjoy themselves, and we need to keep them safe. And, you know, it takes someone who knows what they're doing. Any idiot can book a band. Everybody has a favorite band, and you figure there's a city of 1 million people. There must be 5,000 other people who love my band as much as anybody else. So I can book a band and sell 5,000 tickets to anything, right? And lots of people try, and lots of people lose a lot of money, you know, because the easiest thing in the world is to sit in rooms like we have 1,000 times and think up all the ideas. You know, wouldn't it be cool if I can 17,000 ifs that are awesome, but to actually take the if and turn it into something that's tangible and make it work. And so Scott's been able to figure it out. And that's one of the things I've always admired about him. Maybe the most out of everything is he had the guts to do it.
Going back, you wrote your 3 names on the locker. You make a run of this, but at the time, what was your expectation? What kind of promoter? I know you wanted to be like them, but what was your self-expectation?
First of all, you talked about how small the industry is. The promoter deals with an agency and the agents. You have the responsible agent, the person who signed the act, and then you have the territorial agent, which deals with the different territories. So I deal with the territorial guy there's probably 8. There's less now, but there used to be probably 8 main agencies. And within those 8 agencies, maybe 40 agents that I dealt with.
Wow.
And that was the industry. That was the bulk of the shows that we did. And if you had a rapport with those 8 and those 40, that was key. And it's all about, or used to be all about, reputation. You're going to lose money, you still got to pay your bills. You know, that artist is going to get paid. If they're there ready, willing, and able to perform, you're going to pay them. So you build a reputation, and the only way you're successful in this industry is, and those guys, the Bill Grahams and the Ron Delsners and the Jack Boyles and the Danny Zaleskos and those guys built their little empires on reputation. It was all about reputation. So you had to be able to come through, but then the agent you brought up, the favors, but that's what you get called by your territorial guy, and they'd say, hey, I need you to do Susie and the Banshees or whoever, and we'll get you, you know, somebody much bigger. So that's how the industry was done.
So how would that work? Hey, Scott, you did the Replacements early, you did the Goo Goo Dolls all early, you did the Banshees early, thank you. Here's what we got for you.
Yeah, exactly. And every band, as we talked about earlier, starts in small clubs.
Right.
You know, so when you do No Doubt, you know, Gwen Stefani, when you do them as a favor, and at the end of the show, she comes off the stage here at the Newport and goes out to the lobby and sells her own T-shirts. I mean, those are the bands you're investing in, you know, in hopes that maybe this No Doubt band will be big someday. Or Jewel, I got called by, I think it was Mueller, Don Mueller, and he said, hey, I have this artist coming through every Tuesday. She's going to hit Columbus, Ohio, and she'll go and hit Detroit, she'll hit Cleveland, and can you do her for like the next 6 Tuesdays in a row? So this was a total investment. Find a coffee shop, Scott, to do this. So I found next door. We had Insomnia next door. So I went and talked to them. Can I bring this girl? I don't know who it is, but it ended up being Jewel, and I said I would do the first one. So I went over, and she pulled up in the station wagon, so I helped her unload her station wagon.
You did? I
did. The next Tuesday, Blake Squires comes over and helps me, and the two of us unload. And then the third week, you got all these guys going, hey, can I help? Can I help? Everybody wants to help Jewel unload her station wagon. So I bowed out after week 2. That's how she started. And then as she grew, you got to be, you were in that mix when she was young.
Since we're talking about that on a larger scale, take us to the level of what you had to build, setting up and tearing down every show.
Pull off a show, there's a lot of details. People come to a show and they watch it and love it. They have no idea it all happens in one day. Load in happens in the morning, everything goes up. Show happens, everything comes down. You move out, you come in the next day and do it again. So people just come and think, oh, that was awesome. There's serious amount of hours and work that go into pulling off a show.
And there's a lot of improvisation that has to happen. You can plan and plan and plan in the live business.
Yeah.
But sometimes an artist doesn't show up, they cancel at the last second.
The thing is, the show is going on. You have to figure it out. I'm used to things being fired at me, and you just got to think them through and go, okay, well, da-da-da. Yeah, let's da-da-da-da. That's why I think I became so even-keeled with everything. And you compound that with you're selling alcohol, and people are there to have a blast, and there's really, really loud music. So a lot can happen, and our job at PromoWest is we have to make sure if you're here to show, you're safe. You come to a PromoWest show, you're safe because we're watching to make sure you're safe. We want you to have as much fun as you can have and drink as much as you want to drink, but we have to make sure you're safe. Yeah, I've had fire marshals, police, different people come into a show and they look down at the mosh pit and it looks like, you've seen mosh pits.
Oh yeah.
It looks pretty scary and violent, and it's like, no problem. I mean, we got it under control. I mean, if anything would happen, we've got 3 guys on each side that can take care of.
Right.
But it looks just like, oh my
war.
God.
It looks like war.
It looks like war.
Right.
But that's the fun part of the mosh pit.
As a young promoter, what are the 3 things that you had to keep in mind at all times to be successful, Scott?
Well, the key that I got my hands on the Newport Music Hall. I learned through Bill Graham. Every market has a club that controls the market. You have to get your hands on the #1 club in the market if you're going to control it, because you're growing all the artists through there. So as soon as I heard that it was no longer an Agora and was going to become a Walgreens back in 1983, I got a hold of Hank Lacani and said, Hank, is there any way I'd love to come back to Ohio? I want to take over the old Agora. And Hank said, if you can have 25 grand here by Friday.
What day is it?
We'll lease it to you. It was like Monday.
He saved what we know to be the longest running music club in the history of rock and roll.
And I'm telling you, when Scott took over that thing, it was him. I mean, he was doing it all.
Columbus had some things going on that Cleveland, Cincy, and others didn't. And it was really cool.
To own this Newport was to just be a huge part of the nightlife and the culture of Ohio State and that community.
When he bought the Newport, I go, Scott, there's 50,000 people across the street going to Ohio State. You put the right acts in his club, you're going to do just fine. For him to come back home from the West Coast to reclaim and bring rock and roll royalty back to Columbus is unquestionably amazing.
Scott bought the Agora, now Newport. I think I was at the Neil Young show that September of '84.
I remember him saying to me he wants to make a big splash with that very first concert. And he goes, what do you think of Neil Young? And I was floored.
Showmaker, the never-told stories of rock and roll, is brought to you by Art Makes Columbus, Anheuser-Busch, and Mikey's Late Night Slice.